Hello and welcome to Tonalist Painting by M. Francis McCarthy. This is your painter in residence, M. Francis McCarthy, and the painting we are doing today is called Sunset Trees, and it is a 5 by 5 inch study. I'm doing this video composite in September 2016. I did this painting originally back in it was probably May of 2014, so it's about 2 years old, a little over. And the reason I thought it would be good to maybe do a few of my older pieces, because this video is actually going to be becoming live while I am on vacation. So I plan to do the corresponding blog posts while I'm on the road, but I thought it would be better to have the videos done, mostly because trying to process these videos on the laptop I'm going to be taking with me as I travel could be a problem, and also uploading the whole bit. So my plan is to kind of dole these out as I'm out there, so you guys have something to look at and enjoy. Now, my approach is not much different than it was in 2014. Is one thing I can see is that in my underpainting here, I was definitely using black with the brown, which is something I got away from at some point. After that, I was doing the phthalo green. I've since gone back to doing the black and brown in my underpainting because I prefer it, and it's a lot like an effect that the old masters would get with the colors called bitumen or asphaltum, which was basically tar, and the problem with the using the actual bitumen in your painting is that it can produce a brittle paint surface that cracks, and it can have other problems with drawing, and basically it's just not something that any painter uses anymore. But I did a little research after reading this book, American Painters, on technique recently, and Gamblin has a color they made called, I think it's called asphaltum, same as bitumen, and they're basically mixing their transparent earth red with ivory black. And rather than buy their tubed color, since I use their transparent earth red quite extensively in my work anyway, I just basically working with the transparent earth red, which I was painting with anyway, and I'm adding the black. And ivory black has a certain degree of transparency to it. It's a very interesting color, actually. It's basically sometimes called bone black. More frequently, I think it's called ivory black, which is seems like a contradiction since ivory is white, but this is a black that is produced from burning bones very carefully, and it's a totally light, fast pigment. It won't become any lighter over time, and I use a lot of black in my work, mostly to sort of knock colors back. I don't tend to use the black in the dark areas. I prefer to use a phthalo green and a alizarin crimson, which actually seems to be darker than black. It sort of gives you, when you mix the alizarin crimson with the phthalo green, you kind of get this sort of trippy, deep purple black, and it's a great color because it's alive. When I don't really, there are times that I will do ivory black in the shadow areas, and that's if I'm going after a specific type of old-timey effect. Like I probably did that in maybe 2 out of the 100 days of tonalism paintings I've done, and I know at least one of the follow-ons that I've been kind of tutoing about with, which is the 25 days of tonalism, which at some point I'll be actually finishing. I probably have about 10 of those to do. Anyway, sorry if this is a little rambly. I know I'm always rambling, but these could be even more rambly because I'm trying to get some extra stuff done for you guys while I'm out of town, so that you've got something to look at, and I've got something. I guess I'm quite pedantic and perfectionistic about the elements of my blog, and not just the elements of my blog, I mean my painting, my life in general, who knows, but that's for a psychologist to say. But I want to make sure there's videos there, and I'm actually getting more activity on the YouTube than I am on my blog these days, so I mean that's cool. And however you want to access the information is absolutely fine with me. I've always been fascinated with seeing the artistic process captured, and I wish I'd started doing videotaping of my painting prior to 2014, but the awesome thing is that here it is 2 years later, and I can kind of dig in, and it's pretty clear to see how it was working, and if there were any differences. And it's not a lot of differences, I hate to say it, folks, but I think in general, just looking at how I'm painting this little 5x5, I am using smaller brushes than it's hard to say. It's really hard to say. 5x5 is not very big, so, but my approach is, the broad strokes hasn't changed. I'll do the sky first, and then I do the dark areas of the landscape, and then I will start putting in the greens and reds and other aspects of the landscape, and generally finish up with the lightest parts of the landscape, which would be tans, light greens, things like that. I can't see really changing that. The only time I really did change it up was in some of the 100 days. There were some, especially say if I was doing a Francis Murphy, I found that if I did like a light green wash over the top of the red, and then laid darks on top, that it was definitely reading more like a Francis Murphy than if I did it with my usual approach of laying the darks on top and then the greens on top of the darks. I guess as a bit of a sideline, I should mention that the reason why I like to put darks in first is it's just common sense, really. The shadows will recede and light colors come forward. So if you're doing your shadows over the top of your light colors, you can get it to work. I mean, and there's certainly times when I am going over the painting in another pass where I'll add a bit more. Generally it's adding just more oomph to the shadow areas that are already there. I will not very often that I'm going to declare something to be entirely a new shadow area and paint it on top of everything else. But that can work. It's not. There's no reason to be like super pedantic about it. But as a general principle, it's good to get those shadow areas first. And something that's just crossed my mind last week that I would maybe impart to those of you that are painters that are studying this difficult to do thing of landscape painting, is that your darkest darks will always be in the strong vertical areas. Okay, your darks that are laying on the ground should generally be not quite as dark. Now back here in 2014, I wasn't using any of my one of my new favorite colors, which is raw umber, and one of the things I like to do is to step my darks back as they go back in the distance, which is something I'm much better at now than I was in 2014, is to lay in, I'll take that dark mix I already had mixed up and I start laying in the raw umber, which is a very neutral, very nice earthy color, and that just gives me a dark that is separate from the other darks, so that I can create more of an effect of depth in the work, which is something that, if you look at my paintings, geez, from 2011, 2012, I just wasn't really getting it sometimes when I'd have trees in the background and they're nearly as dark as the trees in the foreground or middle ground. And I'd be struggling with this, and knowing that they should be lighter, but not really being able to pull it off. And that's one of the great things about getting better as a painter. Also, you might notice that this whole painting is going to be done in one pass. There are no two passes here on my 5x7s. I didn't start doing that really until after the 100 Days project that I completed in 2015. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed this little video presentation, and if you would like to see more of my work, go to landscapepainter.co.nz. I'm going to be doing the large version of this next, so thanks for joining me again, and meanwhile, take good care, stay out of trouble, and we will see you next week.